The night on Saipan deepened into a quiet that seemed almost endless. The stars hung low over the island like watchful eyes, as the wind whispered softly through the tall grass and broken trees. The Japanese soldiers moved carefully through the darkness, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth, their breaths steady though their hearts were heavy with the weight of what awaited them. Every man knew that this might be the last night he would ever see the moon. And yet there was no fear, only a strange calm that settled over them like the sea. Before a storm they had accepted what was to come, and that acceptance gave them strength far greater than any weapon could. The officers spoke in low tones, gathering their men into small groups, each formation a fragment of what had once been a proud regiment. They spoke of the dawn and the honor of dying for their homeland. The young ones listened, their eyes bright with a mixture of sadness and devotion. The older veterans stared toward the distant hills where faint flashes of light revealed the American positions, their hands resting on the cold steel of their rifles. They remembered the faces of comrades who had already fallen and whispered silent vows to join them with dignity and courage. All across the island, small fires burned low in the caves and shelters where men prepared for their final stand. Some boiled rice in dented cans. Others cleaned their bayonets until they shone faintly in the firelight. There were no songs. That night, only the steady rhythm of breathing and the faint murmur of prayers that drifted through the night air. The colonel walked among them, his boots silent against the rocky ground, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his soldiers. He saw in them not despair, but resolve, the kind that comes when a man has nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. The sound of the sea carried up from the shore, a slow and constant rhythm like the beating of a heart, waves breaking against coral, and stone mingling with the distant hum of engines from American ships out beyond the reef. On those ships men watched the island through binoculars, seeing only darkness and faint fires. They did not know that thousands of enemy soldiers waited. Within that darkness, ready to burst forth in one final act of defiance, the Marines on land sensed it, though they could feel it in the air. A tension so thick it made their hands tremble and their throats dry. They spoke little, each man lost in his own thoughts as the hours passed. Clouds began to gather overhead, dimming the stars and swallowing the moon. A light mist rolled in from the sea, shrouding the landscape. In a pale silver haze, it clung to helmets and leaves and turned the island into a dreamlike place. Half alive and half dead, the Japanese soldiers stood motionless within that mist, their silhouettes ghostly and solemn. They were no longer men, but symbols of something far larger than themselves, bound together by duty and belief, by a history that stretched back centuries. In one shallow trench, a young soldier sat with his back against a rock. His rifle across his knees, he took from his pocket a small folded paper, a letter written by his mother before he left for the war. Her words were simple, telling him to stay brave and to remember the beauty of the cherry trees. When spring returned, he read the letter again and again until the ink smudged under his damp fingers. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it close to his heart. Above him, another soldier hummed a tune so soft it seemed to fade before it even reached the air. A song from home that spoke of peace and clear rivers and sunlight over the hills, far to the south along the ridgeline. The colonel conferred with his remaining officers, their maps tattered and nearly unreadable. They spoke not of victory, but of timing, of how best to strike, so that their deaths would carry meaning. The decision had already been made. The dawn would be their moment. They would rise as one and charge through the American lines, shouting the cry that had echoed across countless battlefields before them. Banzai. It was not just a word. It was a final declaration that their spirits would not be broken, even. As their bodies fell, the officers saluted one another in silence, their eyes shining with the weight of command. In the American encampments, the mood was different, but no less tense. The Marines had dug deep foxholes and reinforced their positions. With sandbags and wire machine guns were checked. Ammunition belts laid out, grenades lined neatly in the dirt. The men smoked quietly, their faces pale in the faint glow of cigarettes. Some joked in low voices about how long the night would last. But beneath the laughter was unease. Each man could feel it pressing down on him. The knowledge that the enemy would not go quietly. One sergeant looked toward the jungle and said he could hear them breathing. No one laughed at that. The jungle itself seemed to shift and murmur, as if alive, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the drip of rainwater from branches, all blended into a strange melody that filled the spaces between fear and memory. Every soldier on that island, whether American or Japanese, felt the same rhythm of nature, the same pulse of life and death that moved through the humid air, the same sense that the earth itself was watching, waiting to reclaim them when the fighting was done. As the night crept toward morning, the Japanese soldiers began to move into position, thousands of them forming long lines that curved through the jungle like dark rivers. The colonel stood at the front, his sword at his side, his expression unreadable. He looked toward the faint glow of the east, where the first hint of dawn touched the horizon. The air smelled of rain and earth, and the faint sweetness of flowers crushed beneath countless boots behind him. His men shifted quietly, the sound of cloth and metal blending with the sigh of the wind. He raised his hand, and they stilled at once. The island seemed to pause with them, as if holding its breath. Time stretched and slowed, the seconds lengthened into minutes, the minutes into eternity for a moment. There was no war, no fear, only the weight of the silence and the knowledge that it would soon break in a storm of voices and fire. The colonel closed his eyes and thought of the homeland he would never see again, the narrow streets filled with morning light, the laughter of children, the scent of cedar and rice. He whispered a final prayer for the emperor and for peace, then opened his eyes and looked at the faces before him, each one young and worn and full of resolve. In the American lines the Marines could sense it too, though they could not see it. The jungle seemed to hum with unseen energy, a vibration that made the hairs on their necks rise. One corporal nudged another and said quietly that the island was awake. The reply came in a whisper that maybe it was never asleep. The radio crackled faintly with static, then went silent again. The officers moved along the trenches, checking positions, giving quiet words of reassurance, even as their own nerves tightened with every passing second. Back in the Japanese ranks, a few soldiers exchanged quiet words, promising to look for each other in the next world. Others bowed their heads and touched the earth beneath them as if to say goodbye. The colonel lowered his hand slowly, and the movement rippled. Through the lines like wind through grass, men tightened their grips on rifles and bayonets, muscles coiling beneath sweat-soaked uniforms. The faintest light of morning touched the edge of the sky, turning the mist to gold, and for that single instant, everything was still, the world balanced between shadow and dawn. The sea rolled softly against the shore. The wind lifted through the palms and carried with it the scent of salt and rain. Somewhere a bird called once and then was silent. The colonel inhaled deeply, the air cool and sharp against his lungs, and then he gave the signal. It was small, almost invisible, but every man saw it and understood. The stillness broke. The lines shifted as thousands of soldiers leaned forward, ready to surge. From the jungle into history, their final moment approaching with the inevitability of sunrise. The cry had not yet come, but its echo already trembled in the air, waiting to be born. And so the last heartbeat of peace passed across Saipan, the island. Poised at the edge of ruin and remembrance, the Japanese soldiers standing in unity beneath the rising dawn, their hearts steady, their spirits unbroken, their faces turned toward the enemy who waited unseen beyond the mist, the Marines in their trenches, breathing deep and slow, their fingers resting on triggers. their eyes fixed on the darkness that would soon burst into fire, both sides bound by duty, both sides caught in the same endless rhythm of war that had carried them to this place where courage and loss would meet once more under the pale island sun. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the jungle in soft shades of gray and gold. The Japanese soldiers shifted as one, a single wave of motion moving through the lines like the rising of a tide, their rifles and bayonets clutched tightly, their faces pale in the dim light, their hearts steady and full of resolve. The colonel raised his hand slowly, and the signal passed silently from man to man. A breathless instant stretched across the island as the soldiers leaned forward, their bodies coiled ready to spring. Across the field, the Marines felt it first, as a tremor in the ground, a vibration that seemed almost like the heartbeat of the island itself. The young corporal looked to his sergeant and whispered that something was coming. The sergeant nodded silently, his eyes narrowing on the jungle where shadows shifted and dark shapes began to move. The men tensed, gripping rifles, their muscles tight. The morning air hung thick and humid, carrying the scent of wet earth and leaves and the faint salt of the distant sea. Then the air filled with sound, a low roar rising from the jungle that began as a whisper and quickly grew into a tide of voices. The Japanese soldiers surged forward in waves, their cries echoing across the island. Banzai. The word rose again and again, carrying through the mist, through the tall grass and shattered trees. It was a sound that spoke of unbroken spirit, of centuries of duty, of men who had chosen honor above life itself. The first wave moved like a dark river across the open fields, weaving through the pale light of dawn. The Marines opened fire, the rifles cracked sharply. In the cool morning air, the sound bouncing off the hills and trees, the men in the front lines ducked low and fired steadily, each one knowing that discipline was their only chance. The Japanese soldiers pressed on, not faltering, not slowing, their momentum carrying their hope and duty with them across the broken ground. The ground itself seemed to shake beneath them, the rhythm of hundreds of feet, moving as one, carrying the echo of centuries and the weight of history. In the thick of the jungle, the colonel moved with precision, calling quiet orders passing down the line, each word carrying weight. Though spoken softly, the soldiers responded instantly. Their movements rehearsed like a ritual, their bayonets raised, their eyes fixed forward. The mist clung to them, turning their forms into ghosts among the trees. The birds had long since fled, leaving only the sound of leaves brushing against each other and the cries of men merging into one continuous note of resolve and inevitability. The Marines held their ground. The line was steady, though their hearts raced. Every shadow that moved, every leaf that shifted, made them squeeze their triggers tighter. They could see the shapes emerging from the mist like waves breaking on the shore. They fired and fell back, carefully managing the rhythm of the advance. The sergeant barked low commands, telling men to hold steady, to aim, to breathe slowly. And yet inside each of them, the awareness of what was coming made their blood pulse hotter. In their veins, the first wave collided with the outer edge of the American positions. A tension like the snap of a bowstring passed through the field for a heartbeat. No one moved. The mist swirled around them, obscuring faces and forms. Then the cries rose louder, the Banzai echoing across the ridges, and the Marines unleashed a measured storm of fire, keeping the line tight and steady. The ground shook with the motion of thousands moving as one man surged forward, determined to reach the enemy. Before the world could respond, their voices a chorus of courage and devotion, and behind them, the colonel moved silently, ensuring the formation held its shape. In a small clearing, a young Japanese soldier stumbled over a root and caught himself. Raising his head to see the Marines ahead, steady and firm, the sight filled him with a strange mix of fear and admiration. He pressed on, holding to the rhythm of the charge, to the heartbeat of his comrades. The world around him blurred to mist, and sound only the forward motion, remained only the need to move as one to carry the spirit of the regiment, to fulfill the vow they had all made to the Emperor and to each other. The Marines adjusted quickly to the surge, their officers moving along, the line giving quiet instructions and encouragement. The young corporal fired steadily. Each shot measured each movement precise. The line shifted slightly to absorb the momentum of the advancing soldiers like water flowing around stones. Every man knew his duty to hold the position, to remain steady, to ensure that the wave of motion did not break through, and while fear was present, it was disciplined, contained by training and necessity. Through the haze of mist and sunlight, the Japanese colonel advanced with the second line of soldiers behind the first wave, the rhythm of their steps deliberate and powerful. The men raised their voices again, Banzai carrying like thunder through the hills and valleys. The mist swirled around them, turning the field into a dreamlike place, half seen and half imagined. The soldiers moved in perfect unison, their bodies a single instrument playing the final note of a long and unbroken melody. The American lines shook slightly under the pressure. The Marines responded with careful fire discipline, keeping their aim true. The sergeant moved between men, giving quiet guidance and reassurance, his own hands steady. Despite the tension in his chest, the young corporal felt the weight of the moment. Pressing down on him, the first wave had almost reached the outer defenses, and yet still they held steady, waiting for the second wave to collide. The air was alive with sound and motion, a living pulse of determination and resolve. In the mist, a young Japanese officer shouted to his men, keeping them in rhythm, guiding their steps, ensuring the charge did not falter. Each movement a testament to training and discipline, to belief and courage. The colonel watched from the center of the formation, his eyes calm and steady, his presence a beacon of control, as the soldiers surged forward through the haze. The echoes of their cries blended with the soft rush of the wind and the distant waves against the shore, creating a symphony of anticipation and inevitability. The first line of Japanese soldiers reached the outer edges of the American defenses. The mist rolled across the field, hiding and revealing shapes. In rapid succession, the Marines adjusted their positions, shifting weight and stance. Anticipating the movement that had been coming for hours, the young corporal fired steadily and methodically. Each shot measured every pull of the trigger, a small act of order in the chaos. The sergeant moved along the line, keeping men focused, the rhythm of the fight, like a dance carefully choreographed and deadly in its precision. Behind the first line, the second wave surged forward through the jungle, moving with the same discipline, the same resolve. The colonel raised his hand again, signaling the men to keep pace, their movement a river of motion and sound that seemed unstoppable. The morning sun broke further over the horizon, casting light across the mist and revealing the lines of men advancing like shadows stretching across the land. The Marines felt the weight of it pressing down on them, the inevitability of the moment, the tension coiling tighter in every muscle. The Banzai continued forward like a wave rising higher and higher, the cries of the soldiers carrying across the ridges echoing through the mist and trees. The young Japanese soldier who had stumbled earlier pressed on again, finding rhythm in the surge and motion of the men around him. The world reduced to forward movement, and the sound of voices, and the steady beat of his own heart. The colonel kept moving silently along the formation, ensuring cohesion, stability, and unwavering resolve. Each man was a part of a larger whole, moving toward a single purpose. The Marines adjusted again, their line steady. Their discipline holding the ground despite the pressure. The sergeant whispered instructions, encouraging the men to remain focused and controlled. The young corporal felt a strange calm in the midst of the chaos, a focus sharpened by necessity. The sound of the first wave colliding with their defenses, a low roar rising and falling as the battle became a rhythm of fire and motion. The mist hung thick and silver, obscuring shapes, making each movement feel both near and far. The second wave collided with the first, and the echo of cries and commands filled the air. The Japanese colonel moved along the center, passing silent gestures that guided his men, keeping formation unbroken. The soldiers pushed forward, driven by duty, belief, and The long, cultivated spirit of the regiment the Marines held steady, disciplined in their aim and movement. Every man aware of the enormity of the moment and the need for precision. Despite the chaos and noise that surrounded them, the mist began to lift slowly, revealing more of the field. The sun climbed higher, casting shadows that stretched long and pale across the grass. The Japanese soldiers moved with inexorable momentum, their voices rising and falling together as one. The colonel at the center of the formation watched calmly, every man responding to subtle gestures. The young corporal in the American line felt the weight of the moment like a physical force pressing against his chest, every breath deliberate, every movement measured. And controlled time seemed to stretch in the clash, the rhythm of the charge and the countering fire of the Marines, creating a continuous pulse that moved through the island. The young Japanese soldier found strength in the unity of the men around him, each step forward a repetition of the same commitment to honor, courage, and duty. The colonel guided the formation with quiet gestures and sharp eyes, ensuring cohesion in the surge. Every man a part of a living instrument playing the final notes of a long and determined melody. The American line shifted again, absorbing the pressure of the wave, their rifles steady, their aim deliberate. The sergeant moved among them, whispering encouragement, each man aware that their discipline and courage was as important as the strength of the charge itself. The young corporal continued to fire, keeping rhythm with the movement of the men and the surge of the Japanese soldiers. The mist and sun combined to create a world where only forward motion and resolve mattered, and so the Banzai continued its inexorable forward movement across the misted field, the Japanese soldiers maintaining cohesion, the colonel guiding silently and the Marines holding steady, waiting for the moment when the tide would reach its peak, the rhythm of battle stretching and folding in on itself, each heartbeat, each step, each breath, a part of the long, unbroken cadence that defined the morning on Saipan. The island itself seemed to pulse with the energy of the living and the committed as history moved quietly across the mist and light. The sun climbed higher over Saipan, casting a pale gold light across the field that shimmered through the morning mist. The quickly grew into a tide of voices. The Japanese soldiers surged forward, in waves, their cries echoing across the island. Banzai. The word rose again and again, carrying through the mist, through the tall grass and shattered trees. It was a sound that spoke of unbroken spirit, of centuries of duty, of men who had chosen honor above life itself. The first wave moved like a dark river across the open fields, weaving through the pale light of dawn. The Marines opened fire. The rifles cracked sharply. In the cool morning air, the sound bouncing off the hills and trees. The men in the front lines ducked low and fired steadily, each one knowing that discipline was their only chance. The Japanese soldiers pressed on, not faltering, not slowing, their momentum carrying their hope and duty with them across the broken ground. The ground itself seemed to shake beneath them, the rhythm of hundreds of feet moving as one, carrying the echo of centuries and the weight of history in the thick of the jungle. The colonel moved with precision, calling quiet orders passing down the line, each word carrying weight. Though spoken softly, the soldiers responded instantly, their movements rehearsed like a ritual, their bayonets raised, their eyes fixed forward. The mist clung to them, turning their forms into ghosts among the trees. The birds had long since fled, leaving only the sound of leaves brushing against each other and the cries of men merging into one continuous note of resolve and inevitability. The Marines held their ground. The line was steady. Though their hearts raced, every shadow that moved, every leaf that shifted, made them squeeze their triggers tighter. They could see the shapes emerging from the mist, like waves breaking on the shore. They fired and fell back carefully, managing the rhythm of the advance. The sergeant barked low commands, telling men to hold steady, to aim, to breathe slowly, and yet inside each of them the awareness of what was coming made their blood pulse hotter. In their veins, the first wave collided with the outer edge of the American positions. A tension like the snap of a bowstring passed through the field for a heartbeat. No one moved. The mist swirled around them, obscuring faces and forms. Then the cries rose louder, the Banzai echoing across the ridges, and the Marines unleashed a measured storm of fire, keeping the line tight and steady. The ground shook with the motion of thousands moving as one men surged forward, determined to reach the enemy. Before the world could respond, their voices a chorus of courage and devotion, and behind them, the colonel moved silently, ensuring the formation held its shape. In a small clearing, a young Japanese soldier stumbled over a root and caught himself. Raising his head to see the Marines ahead, steady and firm, the sight filled him with a strange mix of fear and admiration. He pressed on, holding to the rhythm of the charge, to the heartbeat of his comrades. The world around him blurred to mist and sound. Only the forward motion remained, only the need to move as one to carry the spirit of the regiment, to fulfill the vow they had all made to the Emperor and to each other. The Marines adjusted quickly to the surge, their officers moving along, the line giving quiet instructions and encouragement. The young corporal fired steadily. Each shot measured, each movement precise. The line shifted slightly to absorb the momentum of the advancing soldiers, like water flowing around stones. Every man knew his duty to hold the position, to remain steady, to ensure that the wave of motion did not break through, and while fear was present, it was disciplined, contained by training and necessity. Through the haze of mist and sunlight, the Japanese colonel advanced with the second line of soldiers behind the first wave. The rhythm of their steps deliberate and powerful. The men raised their voices again. Banzai carrying like thunder through the hills and valleys, the mist swirled around them, turning the field into a dreamlike place, half seen and half imagined. The soldiers moved in perfect unison, their bodies a single instrument playing the final note of a long and unbroken melody. The American lines shook slightly under the pressure. The Marines responded with careful fire discipline, keeping their aim true. The sergeant moved between men, giving quiet guidance and reassurance, his own hands steady. Despite the tension in his chest, the young corporal felt the weight of the moment. Pressing down on him, the first wave had almost reached the outer defenses, and yet still they held steady, waiting for the second wave to collide. The air was alive with sound and motion, a living pulse of determination and resolve. In the mist, a young Japanese officer shouted to his men, keeping them in rhythm, guiding their steps, ensuring the charge did not falter. Each movement a testament to training and discipline, to belief and courage. The colonel watched from the center of the formation, his eyes calm and steady, his presence a beacon of control as the soldiers surged forward through the haze. The echoes of their cries blended with the soft rush of the wind and the distant waves against the shore, creating a symphony of anticipation and inevitability. The first line of Japanese soldiers reached the outer edges of the American defenses. The mist rolled across the field, hiding and revealing shapes in rapid succession. The Marines adjusted their positions, shifting weight and stance. Anticipating the movement that had been coming for hours, the young corporal fired steadily and methodically. Each shot measured every pull of the trigger, a small act of order in the chaos. The sergeant moved along the line, keeping men focused. The rhythm of the fight, like a dance carefully choreographed and deadly in its precise, Japanese soldiers pressed forward, their momentum unbroken, their voices carrying the single word Banzai, rising and falling with the rhythm of their steps. The colonel moved among them, silent and composed, his presence a steadying force, guiding the lines as they surged forward. The young soldiers followed instinctively, trusting in the rhythm and discipline that had carried them this far. The Marines held their ground despite the relentless pressure, their line bending slightly, absorbing the force of the charge like a living wall of discipline, each man aware of the enormity of the moment. The sergeant whispered instructions low and steady, reminding men to breathe, to aim, to remain calm. The young corporal felt his pulse quicken, but his hands were steady. His eyes fixed on the advancing line, seeing them as shapes in the mist and light. a river of motion that refused to slow or falter. The first collision came with a sudden rush, the Japanese soldiers reaching the outer edges of the American defenses, moving like waves crashing on rocks, their momentum carrying them forward. The Marines adjusted their stance, their rifles rising and falling with careful precision. The young corporal fired steadily, his mind narrowing to the rhythm of breathing, pulling the trigger, steadying for the next movement. The sergeant moved along the line, giving silent gestures of encouragement, the ground beneath them vibrating with the collective motion of hundreds of men. The colonel guided his men with subtle movements, his hand rising and falling, signaling shifts in the wave. The soldiers responded instantly, their bodies a single instrument moving forward with purpose and cohesion, their cries of Banzai blending into one continuous note of determination that echoed through the hills and valleys. The mist swirled around them, obscuring the shapes and creating an otherworldly world where only movement and resolve existed. The young Japanese soldier who had stumbled earlier now ran with the current of the formation, his steps matching the rhythm of thousands around him. The Marines held their line, adjusting as the pressure mounted, every man aware that the WWII moment could break or hold the fate of the field hanging in balance. The sergeant whispered to the young corporal to keep steady, to maintain focus. The corporal nodded silently, his hands gripping the rifle steady despite the tension coiling through. His body, the world, seemed suspended in a single long heartbeat, the mist rolling across the field, blending with the light and shadows, turning the clash into a surreal pulse of sound and motion. The second wave of Japanese soldiers reached the edge of the American positions, their steps measured and precise, their cries rising and falling in harmony. The colonel moved at the center, ensuring cohesion, stability, and momentum, his eyes sharp, scanning the formation, each gesture carrying meaning. The soldiers responded instinctively, their movement flowing together as one unstoppable force, their feet pounding the earth, a rhythmic echo that vibrated through the island itself. The young soldier felt the weight of duty pressing on him, the rhythm of the charge becoming part of his very being. The Marines fired steadily, absorbing the energy of the waves, the rifles rising and falling with disciplined precision. The sergeant moved down the line, adjusting stances, giving quiet words of encouragement. The young corporal felt the strange calm that only focus can bring, narrowing his mind to the rhythm of breathing and pulling the trigger. His world reduced to the flow of the advancing soldiers and the pulse of his own heartbeat. The mist shifted and moved around them, hiding shapes and revealing others, creating a surreal and tense stage for the collision of two forces bound by duty. The first lines of Japanese soldiers began to meet resistance at the outer defenses, the clash subtle at first, then growing into a low thunder of sound. The colonel moved quietly through the formation, ensuring the men pressed forward, keeping the rhythm intact. The young soldiers responded instinctively, their eyes fixed on the forward line, their voices rising with Banzai. The surge carried them forward, their momentum unbroken, the ground beneath their feet, shaking with the weight of hundreds moving as one, a living river of solve. The Marines absorbed the shock with discipline, their line bending but holding steady. The young corporal felt the rhythm of the battle in his chest, the pulse of the advancing soldiers in the mist, like waves moving inexorably forward. The sergeant whispered instructions, keeping men focused, reminding them that discipline would hold the line, that their training and focus could shape the outcome. Despite the overwhelming motion pressing against them, the field itself seemed to hum with tension, a living presence witnessing the clash of wills. The colonel guided the second wave forward, his gestures subtle and deliberate, each movement carrying meaning. The soldiers adjusted instinctively, responding to his direction. The rhythm of the charge became a song of motion, their voices rising and falling in a single note of devotion and courage. The young Japanese soldier pressed forward, keeping pace with the formation, his body moving in time with hundreds of others, the mist and morning light. blended together, making the world a surreal place of shadow and motion and resolve. The Marines adjusted their positions again, absorbing the pressure of the advancing waves, their rifles steady their aim. Disciplined, the sergeant moved along the line, giving encouragement silently and through small gestures, each man aware of his role in the collective effort. The young corporal fired with measured precision, each shot part of the rhythm, maintaining the line against the unstoppable surge. The mist and sun combined to create a shifting world where only the pulse of the charge and the rhythm of defense existed. The Japanese soldiers pressed forward with inexorable momentum, their bodies a single instrument guided by the colonel, their cries carrying across the hills. The young soldier who had stumbled now ran with perfect rhythm, the formation flowing around obstacles, trees, and rocks, keeping cohesion as they surged forward. The mist swirled, making every movement both near and distant, their voices a continuous note of courage and duty, their hearts bound together by the same purpose that carried them across the island. The Marines responded with careful fire and discipline, absorbing the shock of each wave. The sergeant moved down the line, adjusting stances, giving encouragement. The young corporal felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, his hands steady, his eyes fixed on the advancing soldiers, every heartbeat a part of the rhythm. The mist shifted around, them hiding and revealing shapes, creating a tense, surreal stage for the living pulse of the clash. The ground seemed to vibrate with the movement of hundreds of men, the tension unbroken, the field alive with determination. The colonel moved silently through the formation, his gestures subtle but precise, keeping the momentum of the second wave intact. The soldiers responded instinctively, their movement flowing together as one unstoppable force. The young soldier pressed on his body in rhythm. With the formation, the Banzai cries rising in harmony with the pulse of the land, the mist and morning sun creating a shifting world of shadow and light, where only resolve and duty existed, the rhythm of the charge unstoppable. The Marines continued to hold their line, their rifles steady, absorbing the pressure of the advancing soldiers. The sergeant whispered instructions, giving encouragement. The young corporal focused on breathing, pulling the trigger, keeping pace with the rhythm of the battlefield. The mist rolled across the field, blending shapes and light, creating a surreal and tense atmosphere. The ground seemed to hum with the movement of men, the tension coiled through every muscle, every heartbeat part of the rhythm. The Japanese soldiers pressed forward without faltering, the colonel guiding their movement, keeping the line intact, their cries rising in one continuous note, the young soldier keeping pace with hundreds around him, his body moving as one with the formation, the mist shifting around them, making the world both near and distant. The rhythm of the charge carrying them forward, a living pulse of courage and devotion. The field vibrating with the weight of hundreds of men moving as one. The Marines adjusted steadily, holding the line, the sergeant moving along the trench, giving encouragement. The young corporal firing with precision, each shot a measured part of the rhythm, every man aware of his role. The mist and sunlight blending together, creating a surreal and tense world, the pulse of the battle moving through the island, the tension stretching with every step of the advancing soldiers, the rhythm unbroken. The colonel continued guiding his formation, silently, keeping cohesion intact, the soldiers responding, instinctively, their momentum unbroken. The young soldier moving in rhythm with the men around him, the Banzai cries carrying across the field, the mist swirling, making the shapes both near and distant. The pulse of the charge a living force pushing forward, the field alive with tension and resolve, the rhythm of the battle carrying them toward the inevitable moment. The Marines held steady their rifles, disciplined, the sergeant moving along the line, whispering instructions, encouragement, keeping the rhythm intact. The young corporal focused on breathing, on pulling the trigger, on maintaining his position. Each heartbeat part of the pulse of the battle, the mist rolling across the field, shifting shapes and light, creating a surreal, tense world, where only resolve and duty existed. The ground vibrating with motion of hundreds of men, the tension stretching unbroken. The Japanese soldiers pressed forward, their momentum unbroken. The colonel guiding each movement with subtle gestures, the soldiers responding instinctively, the young soldier keeping pace, his body moving as one with the formation Banzai rising across the field, the mist swirling, making shapes near and distant, the pulse of the charge, a living rhythm of courage, devotion, and inevitability, the field alive with energy, tension, and determination, every step a part of the long, unbroken cadence. The morning sun rose higher over Saipan, casting long shadows across the scarred fields. The air hung heavy with smoke and mist, and the scent of earth disturbed by the passage of thousands. The Japanese soldiers who remained pressed forward, moving as one, their momentum slower. Now their bodies weary, but their resolve unbroken. The colonel moved among them, silent and composed, his eyes scanning the field, ensuring that cohesion remained. Despite exhaustion, the young soldiers followed instinctively, their minds focused on the rhythm of movement and the promise of duty fulfilled. The Marines held their positions steady despite the relentless pressure, their line bending and swaying under the weight of the charge, but never breaking. The young corporal felt every heartbeat echoing in his chest, every movement around him part of a larger rhythm. The sergeant moved along the line, whispering encouragement and instructions, reminding men to breathe, to aim, to remain calm. The world seemed suspended in a single, elongated moment where every breath, every step, every pulse carried the weight of history and survival. The first waves of Japanese soldiers began to falter, their energy spent and their momentum slowing, but still they pressed forward, driven by the unbroken rhythm of the charge and the devotion to their colonel and comrades. The young soldier who had stumbled earlier moved with the remaining men, his body aching but his will unyielding. He focused on the rhythm of the formation, the cadence of their voices, the collective heartbeat of the regiment pressing forward across the misted field, the sun burning brighter, casting long shadows across the jagged landscape. The Marines adjusted their positions, absorbing the final surges of the charge, their rifles steady, their aim disciplined. The sergeant moved quietly along the line, keeping men focused. The young corporal felt a strange clarity amidst the chaos, a sense of calm heightened by extreme tension, his eyes fixed on the advancing soldiers. Every movement part of the pulse of the battle, every shot measured, every breath deliberate. The mist rolled across the field, shifting light and shadow, creating a surreal, tense landscape of near and distant forms. The colonel guided the remaining soldiers forward, ensuring the formation held together despite fatigue and losses, every gesture precise and deliberate. The men responded instinctively, their bodies moving as one in a living river of motion and resolve. Banzai cries rising faint now, but still echoing across the hills. The young soldier pressed on, matching the rhythm of the men around him. The field alive with energy and tension, every step forward a testament to courage and duty, despite the inevitable cost. The Marines felt the last pressure of the waves, the rhythm of the charge slowing, but still present, their line steady, their discipline holding every man aware of the enormity of the moment. The sergeant moved along the line, giving encouragement quietly, his words a tether grounding men amidst the swirl of mist and movement. The young corporal fired steadily, each pull of the trigger part of the larger rhythm keeping the line intact. The ground beneath them seemed to hum with the weight of the movement, the tension coiling and uncoiling through every muscle. The Japanese soldiers began to falter more visibly, their bodies heavy with exhaustion, their momentum ebbing, but still their eyes held a quiet, unyielding fire, driven by the centuries of tradition and duty that carried them forward. The colonel moved among them, silently guiding gestures small and precise, ensuring that despite faltering, the formation did not collapse entirely. The young soldier moved with the rhythm of those around him, every step a blend of willpower, courage, and discipline. The mist lifted slightly, revealing the field scarred by the passage of men and the echo of conflict. The Marines continued to hold their ground steady, absorbing the final pressure of the charge, the sergeant moving along the line, adjusting stances, giving encouragement. The young corporal, aware of the rhythm around him, of the remaining soldiers moving and the pulse of his own heartbeat. A strange clarity arising from the tension, the field alive with energy, the mist rolling, across the land shifting light, creating a surreal, tense stage for the conclusion of the battle. The rhythm of motion slowing and changing as the waves of the charge diminished. The colonel guided the remaining soldiers forward, ensuring that the line remained intact despite the faltering steps and heavy bodies, every gesture carrying meaning. The men responded instinctively, their momentum slowing, but their cohesion still present, the young soldier matching the rhythm of those around him. Every movement deliberate, every heartbeat part of the pulse of the charge, the sun climbing higher, casting harsh light across the jagged landscape, revealing the scarred field and the shapes of the exhausted and determined. The Marines adjusted to the last of the waves, absorbing the ebbing pressure. Their rifles steady, the young corporal feeling the strange calm of focus, heightened by the extreme tension, each shot measured, each movement deliberate, the sergeant moving down the line, giving quiet words of encouragement, reminding men to hold steady, to remain disciplined. The mist rolling across the field, blending forms, making the world seem both near and distant. Every heartbeat, every breath, part of the long, unbroken rhythm of the day, the island itself seeming to pulse with the collective energy of the living and the committed. The Japanese soldiers pressed forward with waning strength, their movements slower but still purposeful, the colonel guiding with subtle gestures, ensuring cohesion. The young soldier moving with the rhythm of the men around him every step, a blend of exhaustion, courage, and duty. The Banzai cries fading but still present, carrying across the hills and valleys the mist and sunlight shifting, creating a landscape of shadows and light that revealed the scope of the struggle, the field alive with energy, tension, and determination, every motion part of a larger, unbroken cadence. The Marines held steady, their line absorbing the remaining pressure, their rifles rising and falling with precise rhythm, the sergeant moving along the line, giving encouragement quietly, the young corporal aware of the pulse of the battle around him, the rhythm of advancing soldiers, the ebb of momentum, and the cadence of his own heartbeat. Each shot measured, each movement, deliberate, the ground vibrating slightly with the last residual energy of the waves, the mist rolling across the field, creating shifting shapes that hid and revealed the remnants of motion. The colonel continued to guide the faltering soldiers forward, ensuring that their formation remained intact despite the exhaustion and losses, each gesture precise and deliberate, the soldiers responding instinctively, their momentum slower but still cohesive. The young soldier moving with the rhythm of those around him, each step part of the collective pulse, the fading Banzai cries echoing across the hills, the mist and sunlight creating a surreal, tense world where the rhythm of motion and the weight of history intertwined, the field alive with the final echoes of determination and courage. The Marines held their positions steady, absorbing the last pressure, the young corporal firing steadily, each movement part of the rhythm of the line, the sergeant moving quietly, adjusting stances, giving encouragement, each man aware of his role in the collective effort. The mist shifting and rolling across the field, blending forms, light and shadow, creating a tense, surreal world. The ground vibrating with residual motion, the rhythm of the day stretching and folding in on itself, every heartbeat, every breath, part of the unbroken cadence. The Japanese soldiers pressed on, despite fatigue, their bodies heavy and movements slowing, the colonel guiding silently, ensuring that the remaining men kept some cohesion, the young soldier matching the rhythm of the formation, every step deliberate and connected to those around him, the Banzai cries faint but still present, carrying across the field, the mist and light shifting, making the world both near and distant, the pulse of the charge, a living rhythm of courage, devotion, and inevitability. The field alive with the energy of determination and the weight of duty. The Marines absorbed the final. Waves adjusting their rifles, maintaining discipline. The young corporal aware of the rhythm of the battlefield. Every shot, every movement measured each heartbeat, a part of the pulse of the field, the sergeant moving along the line, giving quiet encouragement. Ensuring focus and precision, the mist rolling across the land, creating shifting forms, and light a surreal, tense stage for the final moments of the clash. The ground vibrating with the last residual force of motion, the rhythm of the day slowing, yet unbroken. The colonel guided the remaining soldiers forward, ensuring cohesion despite exhaustion and losses, each gesture subtle and precise, the soldiers responding instinctively, their momentum slower but still together, the young soldier moving. In rhythm with the men around him, every step deliberate, every heartbeat part of the larger pulse, the fading Banzai cries echoing across the hills, the mist and sunlight shifting, creating a landscape of shadows and light that revealed the scars of the struggle, the field alive with the final echoes of motion, energy, and resolve. The Marines held steady their line, absorbing the final residual pressure, the young corporal firing with precise rhythm, each shot part of the unbroken cadence of the battle. The sergeant moving quietly along the line, giving encouragement and instruction, every man aware of his role in the collective effort. The mist rolling across the field, blending shapes and light, creating a surreal, tense world. The ground, vibrating slightly with the last echoes of movement, the rhythm of the day stretching and folding in on itself, every breath, every heartbeat, part of the unbroken pulse of history. The Japanese soldiers pressed forward with waning strength, their steps, slow but deliberate, the colonel guiding them silently, ensuring cohesion, the young soldier moving with the rhythm of those around him, every motion, a combination of exhaustion, courage, and duty. The Banzai cries faint but still present, carrying across the hills, the mist and sunlight shifting, creating a surreal, tense world. The field alive with the final echoes of determination and the pulse of human will, every step part of the long, unbroken cadence of the battle. The Marines remained steadfast, their rifles steady, absorbing the last pressure, the young corporal aware of the rhythm of the battlefield, every shot measured, every movement, part of the pulse of the field. The sergeant moving along the line, quietly giving encouragement, ensuring focus and precision. The mist rolling across the land, blending forms, light and shadow. The field alive with the last residual energy of the waves. The rhythm of the day slowing yet unbroken. The energy of the battle settling into silence as the last of the momentum ebbed and the field lay scarred and still. The colonel guided the final soldiers forward, ensuring that some cohesion remained. The young soldier moving in rhythm with the men around him, every step part of the collective pulse, the fading Banzai cries echoing faintly, the mist lifting slightly, revealing the field marked by movement, struggle, and devotion, the sun high casting harsh light across the jagged landscape, the rhythm of the charge finally slowing the pulse of the day, stretching and folding, settling into a tense quiet, the field alive only with the echoes of human determination, courage, and duty.